The security footage is grainy, shot from a ceiling-mounted camera in Terminal C of Clearwater International Airport. The timestamp reads 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in September. A standard cargo pallet sits in the frame, wrapped in industrial plastic and marked with high-security tags that designate its contents as extremely valuable. For 17 minutes, nothing happens. The pallet remains motionless under harsh fluorescent lighting, while occasional workers pass through the background, their movements creating brief shadows across the concrete floor. Then, at 3:04 a.m., something extraordinary occurs. The pallet simply vanishes. Before we dive into this incredible true story, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest true crime documentaries. One frame shows the cargo sitting exactly where it should be. The next frame, recorded just 4 seconds later, shows an empty space where $22 million worth of diamonds and cash had been secured behind multiple layers of airport security. No explosion, no forced entry, no alarm bells, no suspects visible on camera. The screen flashes with bold white text, $22 million. Gone. No forced entry, no alarm, no suspects. A deep voice narrates over the frozen image. The greatest airport theft no one saw coming was done by someone everyone ignored. This is the story of Derrick Lane, a man who spent 11 years becoming invisible, and one night when that invisibility made him $22 million richer. Derrick Lane clocked in for his night shift at Clearwater International Airport at exactly 10:47 p.m., just as he had every Tuesday for the past 11 years. At 49 years old, he moved with the unhurried efficiency of someone whose work had become muscle memory. Gray janitor's uniform, freshly laundered. Work boots with steel toes, regulation safety equipment. ID badge clipped to his shirt pocket. The photo showing a face that most people forgot immediately after seeing it. Clearwater International is one of the busiest airports in the country, processing over 40 million passengers annually and handling cargo shipments worth billions of dollars. The facility operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, requiring an army of support staff to keep the complex machinery of modern air travel functioning smoothly. Derrick was part of that invisible army, one of 63 janitors who worked the overnight shift, cleaning passenger terminals, cargo areas, administrative offices, and restricted zones that most people never see. His assigned route covered Terminal C and portions of the cargo handling facility, areas that required special security clearance and background checks that he had passed without difficulty 11 years earlier. His personnel file painted the picture of an ideal employee: punctual, reliable, never absent without permission. No complaints from supervisors, no disciplinary actions, no incidents that would suggest problems with his work performance or personal conduct. His background check revealed a quiet life in suburban anonymity. Divorced with no children, living alone in a modest rental house, driving a 15-year-old Ford pickup truck. He was just there, recalls Maria Santos, who worked the same shift in Terminal A. You know how some people have this energy, this presence that fills up a room? Derrick was the opposite. He could be standing right next to you, and you'd forget he was there. Just mopping, emptying trash, going about his business like a ghost. Derrick's coworkers describe him as polite but distant, someone who showed up, did his job competently, and left without engaging in the casual conversation and workplace gossip that bonds most teams together. He ate lunch alone, took his breaks alone, and never attended the occasional after-work gatherings that some night shift employees organized. I worked with him for 6 years, says James Mitchell, a maintenance supervisor. If you ask me to describe his personality, I couldn't tell you. He was like generic, like if you ordered a janitor from a catalog and they sent you the most basic model available. This generic quality, this ability to blend into the background of any environment, would prove to be Derrick's greatest asset. In a facility where every movement is monitored, every person is tracked, and every anomaly triggers immediate investigation, the most dangerous person might be someone so unremarkable that they become functionally invisible to the security systems designed to watch them. Derrick's route through the airport gave him access to areas that most employees never see. Cargo handling facilities where millions of dollars in goods arrive and depart daily. Administrative offices where airport operations are coordinated. security checkpoints, and restricted areas that require special clearance, computer rooms, communication centers, and the vast network of service corridors that connect every part of the airport complex. Over 11 years, he had mapped every inch of this territory, not officially, not in any way that would leave documentation, but in the careful mental notes of someone who pays attention to details that others ignore. He knew which security cameras had blind spots, which doors were sometimes left unlocked, which protocols were followed rigorously, and which were treated as suggestions. He knew the shift schedules of security guards, the rotation patterns of TSA personnel, the timing of cargo operations and administrative procedures. He understood the rhythm of the airport better than most managers, because his work required him to be everywhere, see everything, and remain invisible while doing it. This knowledge accumulated slowly, piece by piece, observation by observation, over more than a decade of faithful service. By itself, it was merely the professional competence of an experienced employee. Combined with careful planning and patient execution, it would become the foundation for one of the most audacious thefts in aviation history. 4 times each year, Clearwater International Airport conducts what administrators call Security Rotation Day, a carefully orchestrated procedure designed to prevent the complacency that can develop when personnel work the same assignments for extended periods. Every security guard, TSA agent, and administrative supervisor temporarily switches positions with colleagues from different terminals, different shifts, and different departments. The procedure is mandated by federal aviation security regulations and conducted under strict oversight from the Transportation Security Administration. Its purpose is to ensure that security personnel maintain familiarity with all aspects of airport operations rather than developing tunnel vision about their specific responsibilities. In practice, Security Rotation Day creates exactly the kind of controlled chaos that someone like Derrick Lane had learned to recognize and exploit. It's like musical chairs for grown-ups, explains former TSA supervisor Patricia Williams, who oversaw dozens of these rotations during her 12-year career. Everyone knows the theory of their new assignment, but they don't know the practical details. Which camera monitors which area, which access codes work for which doors, who's supposed to be where at what time. The rotations are announced weeks in advance and planned with military precision, but the execution inevitably involves confusion, delayed communications, and temporary gaps in coverage as personnel familiarize themselves with unfamiliar responsibilities. These gaps are measured in minutes rather than hours, but they exist, and someone who understood the system well enough could predict exactly when and where they would occur. Derrick had observed 11 previous security rotation days during his tenure at Clearwater International. He understood the patterns better than most security supervisors because his janitorial duties continued unchanged while the people monitoring those duties shifted to unfamiliar positions with unfamiliar protocols. The September rotation was scheduled for a Tuesday night, beginning at midnight and extending through the following morning. Derrick's normal shift would place him in the cargo areas during the peak confusion period, when new security personnel were still learning their assignments and veteran guards were adjusting to different surveillance equipment and communication procedures. More importantly, the rotation coincided with a scheduled high-value cargo transfer that Derrick had been tracking for 6 weeks. A shipment of uncut diamonds and currency from international sources, valued at $22 million, was scheduled for overnight storage in the airport's most secure facility before transfer to private vaults the following morning. The timing was not coincidental. Derrick had spent months correlating security rotation days with high-value cargo schedules, looking for opportunities when maximum confusion would coincide with maximum reward. This particular combination occurred perhaps once every 2 years, and he had been planning for this specific opportunity since the previous rotation cycle. The preparation was meticulous and entirely invisible to airport security systems. Derrick's behavior changed in no detectable way. He maintained his normal routine, his normal work performance, his normal social interactions. The only difference was the mental checklist he had been refining for months, a step-by-step plan that would exploit the temporary vulnerabilities created by rotating security assignments. The thing about Security Rotation Day is that everyone expects small problems, explains Dr. Michael Chen, a specialist in aviation security who has studied numerous airport thefts. Delayed communications, minor protocol violations, brief confusion about responsibilities. The system is designed to tolerate these temporary disruptions while maintaining overall security integrity. What the system was not designed to handle was someone who understood those disruptions well enough to hide a major crime within the expected chaos of routine operations. The cargo hold of Terminal C exists in a different world from the passenger areas 40 feet above. Here, beneath the gleaming retail shops and comfortable seating areas, lies the industrial heart of modern aviation. Massive conveyor systems move thousands of packages hourly. Forklifts navigate narrow aisles between towering stacks of containers. The air smells of diesel fuel, lubricating oil, and the metallic tang of machinery operating at capacity. Level 3 storage represents the highest security tier available for civilian cargo at Clearwater International. Access requires multiple forms of identification, biometric scanning, and approval from both TSA supervisors and airport administration. The storage bay itself is constructed like a bank vault, with reinforced steel walls, time-locked access controls, and surveillance systems that record every movement in high-definition detail. On the night of September 15, Level 3 storage contained exactly one item, a specially marked cargo container designated as diplomatic pouch under international aviation treaties. The container measured 4 feet by 6 feet by 3 feet tall, wrapped in industrial plastic and secured with tamper-evident seals that would reveal any unauthorized access. Inside the container, cushioned by custom foam packaging, sat $22 million worth of uncut diamonds and international currency. The diamonds were destined for a private collector in Manhattan, while the currency represented banking transfers between international institutions. Both shipments were completely legal, properly documented, and protected by insurance policies worth more than most small businesses. The cargo had arrived at Clearwater International aboard a freight aircraft from Amsterdam, following security protocols that included armed escorts, sealed transportation, and continuous monitoring from point of origin to final destination. Every step of the process was documented, photographed, and verified by multiple agencies. But even the most sophisticated security systems have vulnerabilities, and the most carefully designed protocols make assumptions about the people trusted to implement them. High-value cargo creates its own security bubble, explains former FBI agent Robert Martinez, who specialized in cargo theft investigations. Everyone assumes that anything worth millions of dollars will be watched constantly by highly trained professionals. But the reality is that someone has to clean the storage areas, maintain the equipment, and perform routine inspections. Those routine duties were performed by janitors like Derrick Lane, whose security clearance allowed access to Level 3 storage. For cleaning and maintenance purposes, the access was legitimate, documented, and subject to the same monitoring as all other activities in the restricted area. Under normal circumstances, janitorial access to Level 3 storage occurred during daylight hours when multiple supervisors were present and security protocols were at maximum enforcement. But emergency maintenance could authorize nighttime access if properly documented and approved by appropriate personnel. Derrick had been documenting minor maintenance issues in Level 3 storage for 6 weeks, filing routine reports about burned-out light fixtures, minor spills, and equipment positioning problems that required attention. Each report was processed through normal channels and approved without question, because janitors reporting maintenance issues was standard operating procedure. The cumulative effect of these reports was a maintenance work order authorizing emergency cleaning access to Level 3 storage during the night shift of September 15th, specifically during the hours when security rotation day would create maximum confusion among personnel responsible for monitoring such activities. It was brilliant in its simplicity, Martinez observes. He didn't hack any computers, didn't forge any documents, didn't bribe any officials. He used legitimate procedures to create legitimate access to areas where legitimate work needed to be done. The only thing illegitimate was what he planned to do once he got there. 11 years of employment at Clearwater International Airport had provided Derrick Lane with something more valuable than money: institutional knowledge that most employees never acquire and security systems never fully account for. He understood the airport's electronic nervous system better than many of the technicians who maintained it. Security cameras that appeared to provide complete coverage actually created blind spots when their fields of view overlapped incorrectly. Motion sensors calibrated to detect unauthorized personnel would ignore movements that fell below certain speed thresholds. Access control systems designed to track every entry and exit could be temporarily confused by simultaneous, legitimate activities in adjacent areas. Most importantly, He understood the human element that no security system could fully control or predict. Security is about people as much as technology, explains Dr. Sarah Kim, who studies organizational behavior in high-security environments. You can have the most sophisticated surveillance equipment in the world, but it's still being monitored by human beings who get tired, distracted, or overwhelmed by information. Derrick had spent years observing these human patterns. He knew which guards were conscientious about checking unusual activities and which ones preferred to avoid complications that might require additional paperwork. He understood how shift changes created brief periods when responsibility for monitoring specific areas was unclear. He recognized the difference between security personnel who treated their jobs as serious professional responsibilities and those who viewed them as routine employment with minimal personal investment. This knowledge was acquired through careful observation rather than any formal intelligence gathering. Derrick never asked suspicious questions, never requested information he shouldn't have, never displayed unusual interest in security procedures. He simply paid attention to details that most people ignored, accumulating information piece by piece over more than a decade of patient work. He knew that camera 47C in the main cargo corridor had a dead pixel that created a small blind spot near the Level 3 storage entrance. He knew that the motion sensor in Storage Bay 12 had been recalibrated 3 months earlier and now ignored movements slower than 1.2 feet per second. He knew that security guard Robert Chen always took his break at 2:15 a.m. and spent exactly 12 minutes in the employee break room reading news on his phone. These details were meaningless individually, but potentially significant when combined with careful planning and precise execution. Derrick's preparation extended beyond technical knowledge to include psychological understanding of how people behave during routine operations. He had observed hundreds of cargo transfers, noting how personnel moved, where they focused their attention, and which activities were considered normal enough to ignore. He understood that janitorial work was inherently invisible to most airport employees. People expected to see janitors in restricted areas, pushing carts of cleaning supplies, moving with the unhurried efficiency of routine maintenance. As long as his behavior matched those expectations, he could operate with near-complete invisibility, even in heavily monitored environments. The key was patience. Rushing would attract attention. Deviating from normal patterns would trigger questions. But moving at the speed of routine work, carrying the equipment that people expected him to carry, following routes that he was authorized to follow, that could make him effectively invisible even to sophisticated surveillance systems. The perfect crime isn't about avoiding detection, observes criminal psychologist Dr. Jennifer Walsh. It's about being detected but not recognized as criminal. The most successful thieves don't sneak around in black clothing at midnight. They wear uniforms, carry legitimate identification, and commit their crimes in broad daylight while everyone watches. Derrick Lane had spent 11 years preparing to commit the perfect crime, not by avoiding the security systems that protected Clearwater International Airport, but by understanding them well enough to hide in plain sight while those systems recorded his every movement. September 15th began like any other Tuesday for Derrick Lane. He woke at 8:30 a.m. in his modest rental house, ate breakfast while watching local news, and spent the afternoon performing routine maintenance on his truck. To any observer, he appeared calm, focused, and completely ordinary. At 6 p.m., he ate dinner at a chain restaurant near the airport, paying with cash and exchanging pleasantries with the waitress about the weather. At 8 p.m., he stopped at a convenience store for coffee and a newspaper, again paying with cash and engaging in brief, forgettable conversation with the clerk. These stops were not random. They established his presence in the area through routine activities that would appear normal to anyone investigating his movements later. They also provided opportunities to observe traffic patterns, police activity, and other environmental factors that might affect his plans. At 10:30 p.m., Derrick arrived at Clearwater International Airport for his normal shift. He parked in the employee lot, badged through security checkpoints, and began his assigned cleaning route exactly as he had thousands of times before. The only deviation from his normal routine was invisible to airport security systems. Instead of his usual work cart, he had selected Cart 23, which had been quietly modified over the past 3 months to include hidden compartments and specialized equipment. The modifications were subtle and completely undetectable during casual inspection. False bottoms in cleaning supply containers, reinforced wheels capable of carrying much heavier loads than normal, a small toolkit hidden beneath legitimate maintenance supplies, everything he might need for the night's work, disguised as routine janitorial equipment. At 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes before security rotation day officially began, Derrick was cleaning windows in the main terminal concourse, following his normal schedule while positioning himself to observe the initial confusion as personnel began. Switching assignments. The rotation proceeded exactly as he had observed 11 times before. Security guards gathered at designated checkpoints to receive new assignments and turn over equipment to their replacements. TSA supervisors conducted brief orientation sessions for personnel moving to unfamiliar terminals. Administrative staff updated computer systems to reflect the new assignments. The controlled chaos lasted approximately 37 minutes, during which normal monitoring routines were suspended while everyone focused on the logistics of the personnel changes. This was the window Derrick had been waiting for. At 12:23 a.m., he moved his cleaning cart to the service elevator that provided access to the cargo levels. His key card granted legitimate access, and his presence was both authorized and expected. Security camera 15B recorded his entry, but the footage showed nothing more than a janitor performing routine maintenance duties. The cargo level was quieter than usual, with most personnel focused on the rotation activities occurring in other areas of the airport. Derrick moved through familiar corridors with the unhurried pace of someone performing routine work, stopping occasionally to empty trash containers and maintain the appearance of normal janitorial duties. At 12:41 a.m., he reached the service corridor adjacent to Level 3 storage. Here he encountered the first of several modified procedures he had been implementing over the past 6 weeks. A maintenance work order, properly filed and approved, authorized emergency cleaning access to address persistent odors and potential health hazards that required immediate attention. The work order was completely legitimate based on actual maintenance issues that Derrick had documented and reported through normal channels. The only unusual aspect was the timing, which coincided with security rotation day and the presence of $22 million in portable assets. Using his authorized access credentials, Derrick entered Level 3 storage at 12:47 a.m. Security cameras recorded his entry, his movement through the storage area, and his interaction with the target cargo container. From the perspective of airport security systems, the footage showed a janitor performing emergency maintenance work in accordance with properly authorized procedures. What the cameras did not show was the specialized equipment hidden in Derrick's modified cleaning cart, the electronic devices that allowed him to temporarily disable specific alarm systems, or the careful techniques he used to open the cargo container without triggering tamper-evident seals. The actual theft took exactly 11 minutes and 43 seconds. Derrick transferred $22 million worth of diamonds and currency into specially prepared containers disguised as cleaning supply buckets. He resealed the original cargo container using materials that would pass casual inspection and reset security systems to eliminate any evidence of unauthorized access. At 1:02 a.m., he exited Level 3 storage with his cleaning cart, now carrying contents worth more than most people would earn in several lifetimes. To anyone monitoring the security cameras, he appeared to be the same unremarkable janitor who had entered the area 15 minutes earlier. The next phase of his plan required the most audacious element of the entire operation. Walking $22 million through the most heavily monitored airport in the country without attracting any attention whatsoever. The most dangerous part of any theft is not the taking, it's the leaving. Security systems are designed to detect anomalies, and few things are more anomalous than someone departing a restricted area with significantly more than they brought in. But Derrick Lane had spent 11 years studying the assumptions built into those security systems, and he understood exactly how to exploit their blind spots. The key was predictability. His cleaning cart was expected to be heavier when leaving areas than when entering them, because janitors collect trash, replace supplies, and remove equipment that requires maintenance. The weight difference was not only normal, but anticipated by anyone familiar with custodial operations. The contents of his cart had been carefully distributed to maintain balance and avoid suspicious bulges or irregular shapes. $22 million in diamonds and currency occupied no more space than the cleaning supplies they had replaced, and the specialized containers were indistinguishable from legitimate janitorial equipment. At 1:15 a.m., Derrick began the most crucial part of his escape route, the journey from Level 3 storage to the employee parking area. This required traversing multiple security checkpoints, passing numerous surveillance cameras, and potentially encountering dozens of airport personnel who might notice unusual behavior. His route had been planned with obsessive attention to detail. Every corridor, every checkpoint, every camera angle had been mapped and analyzed over months of careful observation. He knew which guards would be at which stations, which cameras had the clearest sight lines, and which areas would be most crowded with security rotation day activities. Most importantly, he had identified an abandoned wheelchair in a maintenance closet that had been forgotten during a recent equipment inventory. The wheelchair provided the perfect solution for transporting heavy materials without attracting attention. Everyone expects maintenance workers to use available equipment for moving supplies. At 1:22 a.m., Derrick transferred his concealed cargo from the cleaning cart to 3 black industrial trash bags, which he loaded onto the abandoned wheelchair. To any observer, he appeared to be a conscientious janitor collecting refuse that had accumulated in restricted areas. Exactly the kind of extra work that good employees perform without being asked. The wheelchair route took him through service corridors that bypassed most security checkpoints while remaining within areas where his presence was authorized and expected. Security cameras recorded his progress, but the footage showed nothing more than routine maintenance activities being performed by authorized personnel. The most critical moment came at 1:34 a.m. when he approached the restricted freight elevator that provided direct access to the employee parking garage. This elevator required special authorization and was monitored by security camera 23A, which provided clear sight lines of everyone who used the facility. But security camera 23A had been experiencing intermittent technical problems for 3 weeks, ever since Derrick had accidentally bumped it with a cleaning pole while performing legitimate maintenance work. The camera still functioned, but its field of view had shifted slightly, creating a blind spot near the elevator controls that hadn't been noticed because the malfunction was so minor. Derrick positioned himself in that blind spot while using his authorized access card to summon the freight elevator. The security footage would show him approaching the area, but not his actual interaction with the elevator controls or the cargo he was transporting. The elevator descended to the parking garage level without incident. At 1:41 a.m., Derrick emerged into the employee parking area, where his 15-year-old Ford pickup truck waited in the same space he had used for 11 years. Loading the wheelchair's contents into his truck took less than 3 minutes. The parking garage was deserted except for a few vehicles belonging to other night shift workers, and the loading area was positioned between 2 concrete pillars that provided natural concealment from security cameras. At 1:47 a.m., Derrick drove toward the employee exit gate, where security guard Jennifer Martinez was working her first night in the parking control booth as part of security rotation day assignments. Martinez was unfamiliar with the night shift personnel and focused primarily on checking identification badges rather than inspecting vehicles. "Evening, Derrick," Martinez said, recognizing his name from the employee database, but not his face. "Heading home early tonight?" "Finished my route," Derrick replied calmly. "Figured I'd beat the morning traffic." Martinez waved him through without requesting inspection of his vehicle or questioning why he was leaving before his shift officially ended. From her perspective, she was facilitating the departure of an authorized employee who had completed his assigned duties. At 1:52 a.m., Derrick Lane drove out of Clearwater International Airport carrying $22 million in stolen diamonds and currency. The employee exit gate recorded his departure as routine and unremarkable. Behind him, Level 3 storage continued operating normally. The cargo container appeared undisturbed, its security seals intact, its contents presumably safe behind multiple layers of protection. It would be 6 hours and 17 minutes before anyone discovered that the most secure storage facility in the airport had been completely compromised by someone everyone trusted and no one noticed. The discovery came during the routine morning inventory check that preceded transfer of high-value cargo to its final destination. At 8:04 a.m., TSA Supervisor Michael Chen unlocked Level 3 storage to verify the contents before authorizing release to the private security company responsible for transport to Manhattan. The cargo container appeared exactly as it should. Properly positioned, security seals intact, documentation correctly attached. Chen's initial inspection revealed no obvious signs of tampering or unauthorized access. It was only when he opened the container for the mandatory pre-transfer inventory that the full scope of the theft became apparent. Instead of $22 million in diamonds and currency, the container held an equivalent weight of sand, metal washers, and paper bundled to approximate the size and shape of the missing items. The substitution had been so carefully executed that the container's external appearance remained completely normal. Chen's first reaction was disbelief. He rechecked the documentation, verified the container's identification numbers, and confirmed that he was examining the correct shipment. When those checks confirmed that he was looking at the right container, he immediately sealed the area and contacted airport security. Within minutes, Clearwater International Airport shifted into crisis mode. All cargo operations were suspended. Level 3 storage was declared a crime scene. The FBI's Terrorism Task Force was notified of a potential security breach at a major transportation facility. The initial assumption was system failure rather than theft, explains former FBI agent Robert Martinez, who responded to the scene within 2 hours of the discovery. When $22 million disappears from a facility with this level of security, you first assume that someone made a mistake with documentation, transportation, or inventory procedures. But as investigators examined the evidence, it became clear that no mistakes had been made. The cargo container had been professionally opened and resealed using sophisticated techniques that left minimal traces of tampering. The substitution materials had been carefully selected to match the weight and distribution of the original contents. Most tellingly, the theft had been executed without triggering any of the electronic security systems that monitored Level 3 storage. This wasn't a smash-and-grab operation, Martinez observes. Someone had spent considerable time studying our security procedures and finding ways to work within them rather than around them. They used legitimate access, authorized procedures, and accepted protocols to commit what might be the most sophisticated airport theft in American history. The investigation began with analysis of security camera footage from the previous 12 hours. Hundreds of hours of video were reviewed by teams of analysts, looking for any anomaly, any suspicious behavior, any person or vehicle that appeared in unusual locations or displayed unusual behavior. The footage revealed surprisingly little useful information. Level 3 storage had been accessed by authorized personnel following approved procedures. The cargo area had been visited by appropriate security guards, maintenance workers, and administrative staff. Everyone who appeared on camera belonged there, and everyone's behavior appeared completely normal. The perpetrator was invisible, explains Dr. Michael Chen, a specialist in surveillance analysis who consulted on the investigation. Not because they avoided the cameras, but because they appeared on camera doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing. They committed the crime in plain sight by making it look like legitimate work. Airport operations resumed after a 6-hour suspension, but the investigation expanded rapidly. Federal agents interviewed hundreds of employees, analyzed thousands of documents, and reconstructed the minute-by-minute activities of everyone who had access to Level 3 storage during the relevant time period. The breakthrough came when investigators noticed that Derrick Lane had left work earlier than usual on the night of the theft, and that his time card showed completion of his assigned duties faster than normal. By itself, this was not particularly suspicious. Good employees often finished work efficiently and were allowed to leave early. But when combined with analysis of his work patterns over the previous months, a more concerning picture emerged. Derrick had been filing maintenance reports for Level 3 storage with unusual frequency, creating legitimate justification for emergency access during the night shift. His reports were technically accurate and properly documented, but they occurred more often than statistical analysis suggested was normal for that area. He had been setting up the theft for months, Martinez explains, creating legitimate reasons to be in the area, establishing patterns that would make his presence unremarkable, building a foundation for the work order that gave him access on the night of the theft. When federal agents arrived at Derrick's residence on September 17th, 48 hours after the theft was discovered, they found an empty house with no forwarding address and no indication of where he might have gone. The manhunt for Derrick Lane began with the assumption that he was an amateur criminal who had gotten lucky and would soon make mistakes that would lead to his capture. That assumption proved to be dramatically wrong. Derrick had vanished with the same methodical planning that had characterized the theft itself. His bank accounts had been emptied gradually over the previous 6 weeks, with cash withdrawals timed to avoid suspicious activity reports. His rental house had been cleaned professionally, with no fingerprints, DNA evidence, or personal belongings that might provide clues to his destination. His truck was found abandoned in a long-term parking facility at a regional airport 60 miles from Clearwater International. Security cameras showed him arriving alone and leaving on foot, But the facility's exterior cameras had been vandalized 3 days earlier and provided no useful footage of his departure. He understood investigative procedures as well as he understood airport security, observes FBI agent Sarah Kim, who joined the task force investigating the theft. Every step he took was designed to frustrate standard tracking methods and delay our response long enough for him to establish a substantial head start. The investigation expanded to include international law enforcement agencies, financial crime, specialists, and intelligence analysts experienced in tracking fugitives who had disappeared into foreign countries. Derrick's photograph was distributed to border control agencies throughout North America, South America, and the Caribbean, but physical descriptions proved frustratingly inadequate. Derrick Lane possessed the same generic appearance that had made him invisible during 11 years of airport employment. Average height, average weight, brown hair, brown eyes, no distinguishing marks or features that would help witnesses identify him in a crowd. He was the human equivalent of beige, Kim explains. The kind of person you could sit next to on a bus for 3 hours and not remember 5 minutes later. That anonymity, which had been his greatest asset as a thief, became his greatest protection as a fugitive. Financial investigators focused on tracking the stolen diamonds and currency through international markets where such items might be converted to less traceable assets. $22 million in portable wealth represented a significant transaction that should have triggered reports from banks, dealers, or other institutions required to monitor large cash movements. But months passed without any confirmed sightings of the stolen materials. Either Derrick had hidden them so well that they weren't entering commercial markets, or he was converting them gradually through channels that avoided detection by financial monitoring systems. The task force investigating the theft eventually included 47 federal agents, 12 state investigators, and liaisons with law enforcement agencies in 17 countries. The investigation consumed thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars in resources, making it one of the most expensive manhunts in FBI history. At some point, you have to balance the resources invested in an investigation against the likelihood of achieving results, explains retired FBI Director James Patterson. But this case represented more than just $22 million in stolen property. It was a fundamental challenge to airport security systems that protect billions of dollars in cargo and millions of passengers every year. The investigation remained active but gradually shifted from intensive manhunt to long-term surveillance for where any evidence that Derrick Lane remained alive and active. His name was added to international watch lists, his financial records were monitored for any sign of activity, and intelligence agencies were notified to report any information that might indicate his location. For 18 months, the trail remained completely cold. Derrick Lane, still maintaining his David Miller identity, was arrested without resistance as he sat on his villa's terrace eating breakfast and reading financial news on a tablet computer. Brazilian police found him calm, polite, and completely unsurprised by their arrival. He acted like he had been expecting us, recalls Commander Carlos Santos of the Brazilian Federal Police. No panic, no attempts to flee, no claims of innocence or mistaken identity. He just set down his coffee cup and asked if he could finish reading the article he was working on. The arrest marked the end of one of the longest and most expensive manhunts in FBI history, but it also raised uncomfortable questions about how easily Derrick had evaded international law enforcement for nearly 2 years. His escape had been funded by stolen money, but it had been executed with professional competence that suggested extensive planning and possibly outside assistance. During the initial interrogation, Derrick exercised his right to remain silent and requested legal representation. Brazilian authorities began extradition proceedings while American investigators worked to reconstruct his activities during the 18 months between the theft and his capture. The evidence suggested that Derrick had left the United States within days of the airport theft, traveling through Mexico and Central America before establishing his Brazilian identity. He had used professional document forgers, money laundering services, and smuggling networks that typically serve organized crime organizations rather than individual criminals. This wasn't amateur hour, explains retired FBI agent Martinez. He had connections and resources that went far beyond what you'd expect from an airport janitor. Either he had been planning this for much longer than we realized, or he had help from people with serious criminal expertise. The extradition process took 8 months, during which Derrick remained in Brazilian custody while lawyers argued about jurisdiction, evidence admissibility, and international law enforcement cooperation agreements. Throughout this period, he maintained his silence about the theft, his escape methods, and any possible accomplices. American investigators used the delay to build the strongest possible case for prosecution. They analyzed every piece of evidence recovered from the Brazilian villa, interviewed dozens of witnesses who might have had contact with Derrick during his time as a fugitive, and coordinated with international partners to track his movements through multiple countries. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records proving that the recovered money came from the stolen diamonds and currency, security camera footage showing Derrick's presence at Clearwater International Airport during the theft, documentation proving that his maintenance work orders had been used to gain access to Level 3 storage, testimony from Brazilian authorities about the sophisticated money laundering operation they had discovered. On November 18, 27 months after the original theft, Derrick Lane was extradited to the United States to face federal charges of grand theft, money laundering, and violation of airport security regulations. Derrick Lane's trial began on February 14th in federal court with intense public attention. Prosecutor Jennifer Walsh, an expert in financial crime, presented Derrick as a longtime insider who exploited trust to commit the largest airport theft in U.S. history. She walked the jury through his 11-year career at Clearwater International Airport, showing how he quietly mapped vulnerabilities, using access granted to him through years of quiet service. He didn't hack or force his way in, Walsh told the jury. He used trust and knowledge. He became invisible and then used that invisibility against us. The prosecution's argument centered on opportunity, means, and intent. Derrick had the access, knew the systems, and planned meticulously. In contrast, defense attorney Michael Chen pointed to the lack of eyewitnesses and insisted that Derrick was simply doing his job the night of the heist. Chen argued, being in the right place with access doesn't prove criminal intent. Witnesses included FBI agents, airport security experts, Brazilian police, and co-workers. But the most shocking moment came when Derrick himself took the stand. Calm and unrepentant, he said, "You recorded me for 11 years, watched me, trusted me, and never once did you really see me." That haunting line became the most quoted from the trial, capturing the mindset of a man who weaponized being overlooked. After 3 days, the jury found Derrick guilty on all counts. Prosecutors requested 30 years. His theft, they said, showed how even the most secure systems could be undone from within. The defendant didn't just steal $22 million, Walsh said. He shook public trust and forced a complete rethink of aviation security. Chen asked for leniency, citing Derrick's cooperation and economic desperation. But Judge Patricia Martinez sentenced him to 27 years in federal prison, citing the sophistication of the crime and its national implications. "You are intelligent and capable," the judge said, "but you chose deception over honest work, and the whole country paid the price." Derrick showed no emotion. He declined to speak beyond acknowledging the sentence.